The morning air was cool and still, the kind that carries the scent of damp earth and pine. Birds chirped from the trees lining the long driveway, and the sun hadn't yet burned off the light mist hovering over the grass. It was one of those quiet moments that feel almost ordinary, until something unexpected shifts everything. Donald Trump had come to inspect a property in rural Virginia, a place tucked away from the usual noise and headlines. He wasn't there for a rally or a press event, just a private visit, walking the grounds with a few aides trailing a respectful distance behind. They moved slowly, boots crunching on gravel, pointing out features of the land, when something caught his eye near the tree line. There, barely moving, was a dog, not just any dog, but an old one, thin, gray around the muzzle. His ribs showed faintly beneath a coat that had once been thick and proud but now looked dull and patchy. One of his back legs dragged slightly as he tried to stand. Around his neck hung a red collar, frayed at the edges with a metal tag so rusted it was hard to read. The dog lifted his head, ears twitching, eyes tired but alert. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just watched. Most people might have walked on, maybe called animal control from a distance and kept going. But Trump stopped. He stood there for a long moment studying the animal. The dog didn't flinch, didn't run, just held his ground like he'd seen too much to be startled by anything anymore. "Who's this guy?" Trump asked, voice lower than usual. One of the aides stepped forward. "Sir, we should probably keep our distance. We don't know where he's been." But Trump was already moving closer, hands open, palms out, a universal sign of calm. "He's not aggressive," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "Look at him. He's just lost." The dog watched him come, tail giving the faintest wag, not excited but maybe hopeful, or maybe just too tired to pretend otherwise. When Trump was about 10 feet away, the dog let out a soft whine, then lowered himself back onto the grass with a sigh, like standing had taken all he had. That sigh seemed to settle something in the air. Trump turned to his team. "Call a vet. Not animal control. Find a real vet, one who handles emergencies. And get a crate. We're not leaving him here." There were murmurs, glances exchanged. This wasn't on the schedule. It wasn't part of the plan. But no one argued, not out loud anyway. Within minutes, someone was on the phone, voice urgent but calm, describing the dog's condition and asking for immediate help. While they waited, Trump didn't pace or check his phone. He stayed near the tree line, crouched a few feet from the dog, speaking in a low, steady voice. Not baby talk. Not performance. Just simple words. "You're okay now. You're safe." The dog blinked slowly, eyes half closed as if he understood. It wasn't long before a white van pulled up. Local veterinary emergency transport. 2 technicians got out, gentle and efficient. They brought a soft blanket and a portable carrier. The dog tensed for just a second, ears flattening, but when Trump stayed close, he relaxed again. "He's been through a lot," one of the techs said quietly after a quick check. "Dehydrated, underweight, arthritis in the hips, maybe the spine. And that tag?" She gently turned it over. "It says U.S. Canine Vet, faded, but it's there." Trump nodded. He served. The words hung in the air, simple but heavy. They lifted the dog carefully onto the blanket, then into the carrier. He didn't resist. Just watched Trump the whole time as if memorizing his face. When the van doors closed, Trump gave instructions. "Full exam. Whatever he needs. I'll cover it." As the van drove off, dust swirling behind it, the morning felt different, quieter, but charged with something unspoken. The aides stood in silence for a moment before returning to the day's agenda. But Trump lingered, hands in his pockets, staring down the road the van had taken. Back at the main house, the story began to spread, not through press releases, but through word of mouth. A groundskeeper told his cousin, who worked at a local diner. A staff member mentioned it to a friend who volunteered at an animal shelter. Within hours, people were asking, "Did you hear? He found an old military dog. Took him straight to the vet." Some were skeptical. "Why would he do that?" One person asked at a gas station. "For the cameras?" But there were no cameras, no photographers, no social media post. Just a man, a dog, and a quiet decision made on a misty morning. At the clinic, the vet team worked quickly. They ran blood tests, took x-rays, cleaned the dog's matted fur, and gave him fluids. His name, they learned from the microchip, was Rex, registered to a retired Army MP who'd passed away 6 months earlier. The man had no family nearby. No one had come for the dog. Somehow Rex had ended up alone in the woods, surviving on scraps and instinct. The staff stayed late that night, taking turns checking on him. He ate a little, soft food, warmed up, slept deeply as if he hadn't in years. When the vet called Trump's office to give an update, she expected to speak to an assistant. Instead, Trump answered himself. "He's eating?" He asked. "Yes, sir." Slowly, but yes. "Good. Keep me posted." That night, Rex slept in a quiet room with a heated pad under his blanket. Outside, the world kept spinning. News cycles churned, opinions clashed, headlines flared. But in that small clinic room, there was only peace. The next morning, Trump returned. Not with fanfare, not with reporters, just him early, before the sun was fully up. He walked into the clinic like any other visitor, nodded to the receptionist, and went straight to Rex's room. The dog lifted his head immediately. Tail thumped once against the floor, weak but unmistakable. Trump smiled. "Hey, buddy." He sat on the floor beside the bed, not caring about the clean clothes or the time. For 20 minutes, he just stayed there, letting Rex lean against his leg, offering quiet words and gentle pats. The staff watched from the hallway, saying nothing. Some wiped their eyes. Later, when asked why he'd done it, Trump didn't give a grand speech. He just said he looked like he'd given everything he had, and no one was there to give him anything back. That simple act, rescuing one old dog on a quiet morning, would ripple outward in ways no one expected. But that was later. For now, in that clinic room, there was only this: a man and a dog, both past their prime in the eyes of the world, finding a moment of quiet understanding. And sometimes, that's where real stories begin. Not with explosions or headlines, but with a sigh in the grass, a hand held out in kindness, and the courage to stop when everyone else walks on. The clinic was quiet in the early hours, the kind of hush that only comes before the world fully wakes up. Rex lay on his padded bed, breathing slow and steady, his body finally relaxed after days, maybe weeks of tension. The vet tech who'd stayed overnight checked his vitals one last time before heading home. She left a note on the counter. Hydrated. Ate 3 or 4 cups soft food. No pain signs. Sleeping well. By mid-morning, the clinic buzzed with its usual rhythm. Barking puppies, nervous cats and carriers, owners asking questions in worried tones. But Rex's room remained calm, a little island of stillness. The lead veterinarian, a woman with kind eyes and sleeves always rolled up past her elbows, reviewed his charts carefully. Blood work showed signs of long-term stress and mild kidney strain, common in older dogs who'd gone too long without steady care. His teeth were worn, some loose. His right hip showed severe arthritis on the X-ray, likely why he'd been limping, but it was the microchip that changed everything. When they scanned it, a name and service number popped up in the National K9 Registry. Rex hadn't just been any pet. He'd served 2 tours overseas with a military police unit, trained in patrol and detection. After retirement, he'd been adopted by his handler, a veteran who'd brought him home to Virginia. Records showed the man had passed away quietly last winter. No next of kin listed, no follow-up from any agency. He fell through the cracks, the vet said softly, staring at the screen. His handler's gone and nobody stepped in. She called the number linked to Trump's office, not sure who'd answer. To her surprise, he picked up on the second ring. "Sir," she began, "we've got more on Rex. He's a military working dog, retired. His handler died recently, and, well, it looks like he was left behind." There was a pause on the other end. Not impatient, just thoughtful. "Left behind," Trump repeated, the word sounding heavier the second time. "Yes, happens more than people think. These dogs give everything, and when their humans are gone, sometimes there's no plan." "Not anymore," he said. "Keep him. I'll be there this afternoon." That simple promise hung in the air long after the call ended. News of Rex's background began to leak, not through official channels, but through the tight-knit network of veterans and K9 handlers. A former MP posted a blurry photo from an old unit reunion. Rex, younger, alert, standing proudly beside his handler. "That's him," someone commented. He was solid, never backed down. Others shared memories. How Rex once found hidden explosives during a routine sweep. How he'd comforted soldiers during long nights overseas. He wasn't just a dog. He was part of a brotherhood, But not everyone reacted with warmth. On social media, some questioned the timing. Why now? One post read, "This feels staged." Another said, "He's never cared about animals before, suddenly he's a hero." The skepticism spread, fueled by years of polarized opinions. Yet for every doubter there was a veteran who quietly said, "If it's true, it matters. These dogs deserve better." At the clinic, none of that noise reached Rex. He spent the day dozing, occasionally lifting his head when someone entered, tail giving a slow thump if he recognized their scent. By the time Trump arrived, late afternoon sun slanting through the windows, Rex was sitting up, still stiff but more alert. Trump didn't come with cameras or an entourage. Just one aide and a manila folder. He walked straight to Rex's room, knelt beside him, and opened the folder. Inside were printed photos, some from military archives, others from old news clips. One showed Rex in full gear, standing tall on a dusty base. Another, years later, showed him lying on a porch, older but still watchful, beside a man in a wheelchair. "I found these," Trump said, holding one up. "You were somebody, weren't you?" Rex looked at the photo, then back at Trump. He didn't understand the images, but he understood the tone, the respect in the voice. The vet watched from the doorway, arms crossed. "He's got a lot of healing ahead," she said. "Physically, yes, but also emotionally. Dogs like him, they carry things. They remember," Trump nodded. "Then he'll heal where he's wanted." That night, instead of returning to his usual residence, Trump made a call. He asked about bringing Rex home, not to a kennel or a guest house, but inside. "He's not a stray," he told the staff. "He's family now." There were logistical questions, of course. Ramps for the stairs, non-slip rugs, a special bed that wouldn't hurt his joints, but no one refused. In fact, several staff members volunteered to help set it up. One even brought in an old service vest she'd kept from her time working with search and rescue dogs. "For dignity," she said. "He should feel like who he is." Meanwhile, a small group of veteran advocates began quietly sharing Rex's story in closed online groups. Not for politics, not for fame, just because they knew how easily these heroes get forgotten. One former handler wrote, "I lost my K9 partner to cancer last year. I'd give anything to have one more day with him. If someone's giving Rex that chance, that's everything." Back at the property, preparations moved quickly. By evening, a quiet corner of the main living area had been transformed. Soft lighting, a heated dog bed, bowls of fresh water, and a low table with meds neatly labeled. A young staffer, usually tasked with scheduling, spent hours researching senior dog diets and gentle exercises. "He's earned this," she told a coworker. "Every bit of it." When Rex arrived that night, carried in gently by two men who treated him like fragile glass, he took it all in slowly. Sniffed the rugs, tested the bed with one paw, then with a deep sigh he lay down, fully, completely, as if he finally believed he was safe. Trump sat nearby in a chair, not saying much. Just being there. After a while, Rex lifted his head and rested it on Trump's shoe. Not demanding, just connecting. Outside, the world kept spinning. Debates raged, headlines flashed, opinions clashed. But inside that room, none of it mattered. There was only this, an old dog who'd served his country, and a man who decided that service shouldn't be forgotten just because the uniform was gone. What happened next wouldn't be announced with fanfare. There'd be no press release, no staged photo. But in the days that followed, something shifted, not just for Rex, but for everyone who heard his story. Because sometimes the most powerful acts aren't loud. They're quiet, they're consistent. And they remind us that dignity isn't reserved for the young, the strong, or the famous. It belongs to anyone who's given their all. And Rex? He slept deeply that night. For the first time in a long time, he didn't dream of empty houses or echoing silence. He dreamed of warmth, of a hand resting gently on his head, of belonging. That's when the real healing began. Not just in his body, but in his spirit. And no one, not even those who doubted, could deny the truth in that. Days turned into weeks, and something quiet but steady began to take root. Rex wasn't just staying at the residence, he was becoming part of it. Morning started with the soft click of his nails on the hardwood, as he followed Trump out to the porch, moving slower than most, but never missing a step. He'd settle onto a thick cushion near the railing, ears perked, eyes tracking birds or the distant hum of a lawnmower. Trump would sit nearby with his coffee, sometimes reading, sometimes just watching the sunrise. They didn't need words. There was a rhythm between them now, comfortable, calm, real. Staff noticed the change first. At first, they'd kept their distance, unsure how to act around a dog with such a past. But Rex had a way of putting people at ease. He never begged, never barked without reason. If someone sat near him, he'd offer a gentle nudge of his nose, just enough to say hello. One housekeeper started bringing him a small piece of boiled chicken with his dinner. Another made sure his water bowl was always filled with fresh, cool water, even on the hottest afternoons. But it was the walks that surprised everyone. Every afternoon, without fail, Trump would clip on Rex's leash, not the fancy kind. Just a simple, sturdy strap, and they'd walk the grounds together. Not fast, not far, just slow loops around the garden, down the gravel path, sometimes stopping under a big oak tree where Rex would lift his nose to the wind like he was remembering something good. Trump never rushed him. If Rex needed to rest, they'd sit on a bench. If he wanted to sniff a patch of grass for 5 full minutes, they'd wait. It wasn't performance. It was patience. People who saw them from a distance, gardeners, security, delivery drivers, began to smile when they passed. There was something deeply human about it. A man known for speed and spectacle, now moving at the pace of an aging dog, giving him time, space, and quiet respect. Inside the house, Rex had his own routine. Physical therapy twice a week. Gentle stretches, warm compresses, short sessions on a low treadmill designed for senior dogs. A vet tech came regularly, not in a white coat but in jeans and a t-shirt, so Rex wouldn't feel like he was back at the clinic. He learned to lift his paw for medicine, to lie still for massages that eased the ache in his hips, and every night before bed, someone would brush his coat until it shone, careful around the thin spots, whispering soft words like, "You're doing great, buddy." What shocked people most wasn't the care, it was the consistency. This wasn't a one-time rescue for a photo op. It was daily, relentless, real. Weeks passed and Rex gained a little weight. His coat grew thicker. His eyes lost that hollow look. He even started wagging his tail when he heard Trump's voice from another room. A slow, steady thump against the floor that meant, "I know you're here." One rainy afternoon, a reporter showed up at the gate hoping for a comment. "Is it true you're keeping the military dog?" he asked. Trump, standing under the porch awning with Rex at his side, just nodded. "He's home." "No plans to donate him to a shelter or make a public event out of it?" "Nope," Trump said. "He's not a prop, he's family." The reporter blinked, then smiled faintly. "Mind if I take a quick picture? Just for the local paper?" Trump looked down at Rex, who was watching the rain with quiet curiosity. "Only if he's okay with it." The photo that ran the next day wasn't staged. It showed Trump in a simple windbreaker, hand resting lightly on Rex's back, both of them looking out at the storm. No flags, no slogans, just two beings sharing a moment of peace. The caption read, "A quiet bond." That image spread, not virally, but steadily, shared in veteran forums, posted on K9 rescue pages, printed in a small-town newsletter. People who'd been skeptical began to reconsider. "Maybe it's real," one comment read. "Look at how relaxed the dog is. You can't fake that." Meanwhile, behind the scenes, something else was happening. Trump had quietly instructed his team to look into the broader issue. What happens to retired military and police dogs when their handlers pass away or can no longer care for them? The answer wasn't pretty. While federal law now allows these dogs to be adopted by their handlers or families, there's no safety net if those options disappear. Many end up in shelters overlooked because of their age or special needs. Some are even euthanized, not because they're unlovable, but because resources are scarce. He didn't announce this research, didn't tweet about it. Just asked questions, listened to answers, and took notes. Back at the house, Rex continued to heal, not just in body, but in spirit. One evening, during a thunderstorm, he trembled slightly, ears pinned back. Trump didn't scold or ignore it. He simply moved Rex's bed into his own room, placed it near the bed, and left the door open. By morning, Rex was sleeping soundly, one paw resting on the edge of the mattress like he was guarding his person, even in dreams. Staff began to see a different side of Trump, too. He'd ask about Rex's appetite, his mood, whether he'd taken his supplements. He remembered the vet tech's name. He thanked the housekeeper who washed Rex's bedding by hand to keep it soft. These weren't grand gestures. They were small human things, the kind that build trust over time. Then came the day Rex did something no one expected. Trump was on a call in the study, voice low and serious. Rex, usually content to nap nearby, suddenly stood up, stiff but alert. He walked to the door, sat, and let out a single soft bark. Not aggressive, but purposeful. A moment later, a staff member appeared, looking flustered. "Sorry, sir. He wouldn't let me pass until I knocked." Trump paused the call, looked at Rex, then smiled. "He's still on duty." That moment stuck with people, because it wasn't about politics or image. It was about loyalty, about a dog who, even in retirement, hadn't forgotten his purpose: to protect, to watch, to care. Word of Rex's progress reached a retired canine handler living 2 states away. The man had trained dogs like Rex for 20 years. When he heard the story, he wrote a letter, not for publicity, just to say thank you. "These dogs give everything," he wrote. "When someone honors that, it matters more than you know." Trump read the letter twice. Then he tucked it into the folder with Rex's photos. By the end of the month, Rex was walking farther, eating better, even playing gently with a soft rubber toy someone had given him. He'd chase it a few feet, pick it up proudly, and bring it back, tail wagging like a dog half his age. Those moments, small as they were, felt like victories. And through it all, Trump never made it about himself. He didn't post updates, didn't invite cameras. He just showed up every day with food, with time, with presence. That's what shocked people most. Not the rescue, not the headlines, but the quiet, unwavering choice to stay, to care, to treat an old dog not as a symbol, but as a soul who'd earned dignity. In a world that often moves too fast, that kind of stillness spoke louder than any speech ever could. It started with a phone call, not to a news outlet, not to a campaign team, but to a small nonprofit tucked away in the hills of Tennessee. The organization had a simple name: Second Leash. They specialized in one thing: finding homes for retired police and military dogs whose handlers had passed away or could no longer care for them. Most of their work happened in silence, funded by bake sales, local donations, and the occasional grant. They'd placed dozens of dogs over the years, but the need always outpaced their resources. When Trump called, the director almost didn't believe it was him. She answered on the third ring, voice tired from a long day of coordinating transports and vet bills. "Hello? Is this the Second Leash program?" he asked. "Yes." "Who's this?" He introduced himself plainly, no fanfare. Then he asked questions, real ones. How many dogs were currently waiting for placement? What were the biggest hurdles? Medical costs, housing, public awareness? She answered honestly, surprised by how much he already seemed to know. After 20 minutes of conversation, he said, "I'd like to help. Not with a check and a photo. I want to build something that lasts." That was the beginning. Within days, a quiet partnership formed. No press release, no logo unveiled. Just a series of meetings between Trump's team and the leaders of Second Leash, along with 2 other veteran-focused animal groups. They talked about gaps in the system, how a retired canine might get adopted but then struggle with expensive arthritis meds or mobility aids, how some shelters turned these dogs away because they didn't have the staff or knowledge to handle their needs, how families who wanted to adopt often couldn't afford the ongoing care. Out of those talks came a simple idea: a program that would cover not just adoption fees, but lifetime medical support, home modifications, and even respite care for aging handlers who needed a break. They called it Valor's Promise, and named not for show, but because every dog in the program had lived up to that word. Funding came quietly. Trump personally covered the startup costs, vet networks, transport vans, a small team to manage applications. But he insisted the program be run entirely by the nonprofits. "You know this work," he told them. "I'm just here to remove the roadblocks." The first dog helped under Valor's Promise wasn't famous. She was a 10-year-old Belgian Malinois named Juno, retired from Border Patrol after a leg injury. Her handler, a quiet man in his 60s, had been struggling to pay for her pain medication and special diet. When he heard about the new program, he cried on the phone. "I thought I'd have to give her up," he said. "Now I get to keep her until the end." Juno's story didn't make national news, but it spread through veteran communities like wildfire, because it wasn't about politics, it was about relief, about dignity, about knowing someone saw your sacrifice and your dog's and said, You don't have to carry this alone. Back at the residence, Rex had no idea he'd inspired something bigger. He spent his days napping in sunbeams, taking slow walks and occasionally stealing a sock from the laundry basket, just to watch the staff chase him in mock outrage. He'd gained enough strength to trot short distances now, and his eyes sparkled with a quiet joy that hadn't been there weeks before. Trump still walked with him every afternoon. But now sometimes he'd talk softly as they moved, not about deals or headlines, but about service, about loyalty, about how some of the best teachers in life walk on four legs. One evening, a local news crew managed to get footage from a distance, just a wide shot of the two walking along the tree line, golden hour light wrapping around them. The segment aired with a simple narration. While the world watches the headlines, something quieter is happening here. A promise being kept. Veterans groups began reaching out, not to praise or criticize, but to ask how they could help. A retired Marine started a local chapter of dog-walking volunteers for senior K-9s. A veterinarian in Ohio offered free dental cleanings for enrolled dogs. A high school shop class built custom ramps for homes that needed them. None of it was coordinated by Trump, it just grew, like kindness often does when given room to breathe. Then came the first official placement under Valor's promise. A German shepherd named Duke, 13 years old, retired from a city police force after a spinal injury. His handler had died suddenly, and Duke had been living in a temporary foster home, confused and withdrawn. Through the program, he was matched with a former Army medic who'd lost his own service dog years ago. When they met, Duke lifted his head, sniffed the man's hand, and leaned into his leg like he'd known him forever. The moment was captured on a phone by a program coordinator, not for social media, but for the file. Later, she showed it to Trump. He looked at the photo for a long time, then said, "That's why we do this." There were challenges, of course. Some people still questioned the motives. "Why now?" they asked. "Why him?" But the dogs didn't care about politics. They only knew if they were safe, fed, and loved. And under Valor's promise, they were. Applications poured in, not from celebrities or influencers, but from ordinary people. A widow in Maine who wanted to honor her late husband by adopting his former K-9 partner. A young veteran in Texas recovering from injury, who said a dog like Rex would give him purpose. A retired firefighter in Oregon who'd trained with K-9 units and wanted to give back. Each case was reviewed carefully. Not for publicity, but for fit. The goal wasn't to place as many dogs as possible, it was to place them right. Meanwhile, Rex continued to thrive. He'd started greeting visitors with a gentle wag, even letting children pet him if they moved slowly. One afternoon, a group of veterans came to tour the grounds as part of a quiet outreach event. When they saw Rex, several stopped in their tracks. One man knelt, tears in his eyes. "I served with dogs like him," he said. "They never quit, even when they were hurt." Rex walked over and rested his chin on the man's knee. No fanfare, just connection. That night, Trump sat on the porch alone, Rex at his feet. The stars were bright. The air was still. And for a moment, none of the noise of the world mattered. There was only this, a dog who'd been left behind, now living in peace, and a program that might help hundreds more find the same. He didn't need applause, didn't need headlines. What mattered was that Duke was sleeping safely in his new home, that Juno was getting her medicine, that somewhere another old K-9 was hearing the words, "You're coming with me." Valor's promise wouldn't solve everything, but it was a start, a real one, built not on speeches but on action, not on image but on care, and sometimes that's enough to change everything. It began with a story no one expected to go far. A veteran journalist, someone who'd spent decades covering wars, not politics, wrote a short piece for a regional magazine. No flashy headline, no dramatic music, just a quiet account of an old military dog found alone in the woods, rescued by a man most people only knew from headlines, and the small, steady acts of care that followed. The journalist had visited the property himself, not for an interview, but to see Rex. He watched how the dog moved, how he looked at Trump, how the staff spoke about him, not with rehearsed lines, but with the kind of warmth that's hard to fake. The article ended with a single line. "Sometimes, the most powerful revolutions start with a bowl of water and a place to rest." That piece, meant for a few thousand readers, got shared. Not by bots or algorithms, but by real people. Veterans, dog trainers, shelter workers, ordinary folks who'd once loved an old pet. It landed in email inboxes, was printed and pinned to community boards, read aloud at support group meetings. Within weeks, it had been picked up by a national outlet, then another. Not because it was sensational, but because it felt true. And that's when everything shifted. And through it all, the world kept turning, but differently now. Shelters reported that senior dog adoptions had doubled in some areas. Pet supply stores started carrying more joint supplements and orthopedic beds. Even TV shows began featuring older rescue dogs in heartwarming storylines, not as sad cases, but as wise, loyal companions. The change wasn't loud. It didn't come with hashtags or viral dances. It came in the quiet choices people made every day. Choosing the older dog at the shelter, donating to a canine medical fund, slowing down to pet a gray-muzzled face instead of walking past. Then came the morning when Rex didn't get up right away. He lay in his bed by the fireplace, breathing slow and even. His eyes opened when Trump sat beside him and he gave the faintest wag, just a whisper of his tail against the quilt. Trump stayed there all morning, hand resting gently on Rex's side, talking softly about nothing and everything, the weather, the birds outside, the way the leaves had turned gold again. Later that day, the vet came, not to fix but to ease. She knelt beside Rex, stroked his ears and whispered, "You did good, boy." He looked at her, then at Trump, and closed his eyes. When it was over, there were no speeches, no public statements, just a quiet moment of gratitude for a life well lived and well loved. But Rex's story didn't end there. In the weeks that followed, donations poured into Valor's Promise, not in his name, but in the spirit of what he represented. A new wing was dedicated at a canine retirement facility called Rex's Rest, with wide windows, heated floors, and a garden where dogs could nap in the sun. A children's book was written, simple, honest, illustrated with soft watercolors, telling the story of an old dog who found a second chance. Proceeds went to senior dog rescue groups, and every year on the anniversary of his rescue, a small gathering is held at that facility. Veterans, handlers, volunteers, and families come together, not to mourn but to celebrate. They bring their dogs, old and young, and share stories under the trees. There's laughter, there are tears, but mostly there's gratitude. Because Rex taught them something simple but profound, that compassion isn't about grand gestures. It's about seeing someone, human or animal, who's been overlooked, and choosing to stop, to care, to stay. Trump still walks the same path Rex once did, though now it's often with a new dog at his side, a retired detection canine named Finn, placed through Valor's Promise after his handler passed. Finn is younger, more energetic, but he carries the same quiet dignity, and every now and then, when the light hits just right, Trump swears he sees Rex in the way Finn tilts his head or rests his chin on a shoe. The world may never fully agree on much, but on this there's growing unity. Every life that is served deserves to be honored, not just in words but in action. And sometimes all it takes is one person, one dog, and one quiet morning in the woods to remind us of that truth.